All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, like apparently many people across the country, I got interested in the Alex Murdaugh trial after watching the Netflix documentary on his family. There's a lot to say about the class element of a patriarchal family in the South effectively owning the legal system even today in 2023 in the United States of America, but I have a slightly different take, which is likely to be unpopular. But look, still bears some thinking about after the most recent guilty verdict. The means through which the state got his conviction makes me very uncomfortable for the future of jurisprudence in the United States. And to be clear, if you ask me, I think he probably did it. Certainly things look that way, but that's kind of the point. For those who haven't watched the wild twists and turns of the case, I guess a fair way to sum it up quickly is this. There's this Murdaugh family down in rural South Carolina. It's very powerful. Over the years, a number of crazy things resulting in the deaths of local residents have happened around them, which culminated in the murder of the wife and the son of Alex Murdaugh. The state of South Carolina asserts that Murdaugh murdered his wife and son in a fit of desperation to draw attention away from his myriad admitted financial crimes supporting his ongoing drug habit. That means that the means, though, through which the state proved this murder is what I want to focus on. From day one, prosecutors indicated that despite the fact that such a murder would normally be pursued as a death penalty case, they would instead seek life without parole. Why? Because the case against Murdaugh is largely circumstantial. Murdaugh maintains that his innocence and his son was likely killed in a revenge scheme after he was previously the lead culprit in a drunken boating accident that killed local girl Mallory Beach. Now, the way in which the state proved beyond a reasonable doubt to the jury that Murdaugh committed the crime was not only circumstantial, but relied almost entirely on technology. Murdaugh's version of events was that he was not present at the scene of the crime when the murders were committed on his property. The state, however, reconstructed the crime, relying almost entirely on cell phone usage of the victims and of Murdaugh himself. They placed nearly the exact time of the murders based upon the last time that both victims had last unlocked their cell phones. They looked at the exact timestamp of Snapchat video allegedly posted minutes before the murders, which purported to show Murdaugh's voice in the background. They looked at the exact step counts of the two murder victims and of Alex Murdaugh to see how much they had moved and if Murdaugh himself had intentionally didn't have his phone on him at the time of the murder. Prosecutors then showed exactly minutes after the purported murders had taken place that Murdaugh's phone showed a massive increase in activity where he allegedly worked to construct an alibi for himself. One of the ways they show that is he left the house after the alleged murder at an exact point was by pulling the records from the OnStar system on board his car. They even were able to pinpoint the exact speed he was going on the highway. And they posit, based upon his step count, gleaned from his Apple Health data, that he'd been pacing around during his alleged alibi time while he was on the phone in a nervous fit. Now, you put it together that way, and it sounds bad, right? But as Farhad Manjoo at the New York Times notes, there's another explanation that could make some sense. For instance, the son's phone, which was never unlocked again, was at 2% battery the last time that he opened it. The other victim, Maggie Murdaugh's phone, showed changes in orientation from sideways to vertical and recorded moving some steps after her alleged murder. Her phone was later then found on the side of the road where prosecutors say that he threw it out the window. But weirdly, he apparently is also the guy who gave them the password to his wife's phone, where they got all this data. Furthermore, the OnStar system shows him speeding not only to the place of his alibi, but also on the way back from his alibi. And as for the pacing, as Manjoo writes, lots of people walk around while they're on the phone. That's totally normal. I do it too. Not necessarily, as the state says, evidence that he was trying to, quote, hide something nervously pacing. Look, I am not saying he didn't do it. Somebody obviously killed those people, and he had a very good motive. He had a sketchy history, and if someone else did a decent job of ruling out other suspects. The point, though, is that we need to be wary of putting people away for life in prison based purely on cell phone data, which we think is ironclad. In reality, it's an imperfect picture of a complicated real world. As Farhad points out, previous studies have showed that the Apple step count data is off by a very wide range. On average, some of it is 12% compared to a comparable pedometer. None of this, apparently, was considered by the jury, who found him guilty within 3 hours after the reams of evidence were presented. And to be transparent, maybe I would have voted for the same way. But something has to stick in the back of our minds about this type of technological framing around inaccurate data, and we need to have some hubris about what we really know and don't know to question how much confidence that we can actually have. Consider, for example, the Adnan Syed trial. Syed, of the Serial podcast fame, famously was put behind bars under a similar presentation to the jury. Prosecutors used Syed's cell phone data to say his phone was in the area of the body of the victim, Hae Min Lee, because it pinged a tower nearby the park between the hours where they suspect that her body was buried. However, AT&T data at the time noted incoming calls are, quote, not considered reliable information for location. Despite this, prosecutors presented the cell phone tower data as fact, and it was one of the major reasons he was granted a mistrial and he remains free right now. As you can see, at the time of the trial in 2000, they considered this open and shut, no questions asked. I can tell you also, as someone who uses a Whoop band, an Apple Watch, and rely on my data, I know it's not 100% accurate, which they themselves will tell you. It's useful because if it's off, at least it's off consistently, so you can judge for yourself how you're doing. That's perfectly okay when you're using it to track calories, heart rate zones, and working out. But just a few months ago, a man was sentenced to 65 years in prison, where prosecutors relied on the victim's Fitbit data to disprove the alleged alibi of her husband. Again, looking at the case, he looks guilty as hell. His explanation is incredibly dumb. A random masked man broke into his house, killed his wife, and then only happened to give him superficial knife wounds. Okay. But an independent study of the Fitbit step counts showed it was only consistent, quote, approximately half the time. We increasingly have prosecutors who are casting this type of data as absolute fact, when at least in my mind, it's right there on the edge of reasonable doubt. I don't exactly know what the point of this monologue is, only to raise awareness of the new tools that the state is using against criminals and for people to be very aware of the real consequences of what it actually means to be tracked all the time. Who knows the cases they can build against anyone in the future using this type of data. So I'm curious what you think, Crystal. I'm gonna be honest, I'm looking at this stuff.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.